Hey everyone, this is Pete and welcome to the December 2020 Q&A session. If you want to submit your questions for next month's Q&A session, become an S-Rank patron over at patreon.com/Pete Davison and you can be part of this. So it'd be great to have some more questions each month for this. I'm having a lot of fun recording these videos, so if you want to be part of it, then sign up and join up on Patreon. You can also join for £1 a month on Patreon to become an A-Rank patron, and that way you get daily blog posts and early access to certain things over there as well, all the usual stuff that people provide over on Patreon. Anyway, to the questions. We got a few from several people today, so we will kick off with one from Misty. Misty asks, we all know that you, like most of us, appreciate Japanese games a lot, but are there any somewhat mainstream Western games you've enjoyed recently? You know, the kind of stuff your casual gamer Joe has at least heard about on more than one occasion, if not played himself. Maybe you religiously purchase yearly Call of Duty installments or are secretly a huge FIFA fan. I'd be particularly interested to hear about games that came out within, say, the last 10 years. Well, I can confirm that I am not a religious purchaser of Call of Duty. The last Call of Duty I played was Modern Warfare 3. I think that was while I was still working at US Gamer, and the experience struck me as one of the most insulting things to my intelligence that I've ever been through, and I haven't touched a Call of Duty since, even for multiplayer. So yeah, I've absolutely no desire to play Call of Duty. FIFA, the same. If you've watched any of my Atari A to Z flashback coverage, you'll know that I have no particular love for sports games, particularly those that try to be quote-unquote realistic depictions of the sport. FIFA is very off-putting to me, in particular because of all the microtransactions and the Ultimate Team stuff. So that initially sounded like an interesting idea, but given the focus on spending real money on that proved really off-putting. But there are some games that I want to highlight. The first one, and probably the most high-profile one on the list, would be The Witcher 3. Which I played through quite late. I played it through after all of the expansion packs came out. I got a good deal on it on, I can't remember if it was Steam or GOG, one of those two places. But I played that through and I really enjoyed it. The one thing that really stood out to me with The Witcher 3 was that I really didn't think it needed to be an open world game. All of the open world stuff in The Witcher 3 I found a complete chore. And where it really shone was in what it had always done, which was tightly scripted encounters with interesting dialogue and characters with interesting perspectives on morality and that sort of thing. So that sort of thing I found really good about The Witcher. And I've actually said on several occasions that I would have preferred The Witcher in general if it was just an adventure game rather than an RPG, because the actual more RPG side of things in The Witcher has always been the weakest side of things to me. The combat and the spell casting and all that sort of thing. It just seems to take away from what I think is the core appeal of the series, which is the storytelling and the characterization. These wonderful characters that you meet and you interact with and you find out more about over the course of the various games. I'm normally one for sort of getting on with RPG mechanics and letting them support a story, but The Witcher is an example where I felt like they got a bit in the way, but that didn't stop me from enjoying the experience. The Witcher 3 is probably the most high-profile Western game that I've enjoyed lately. Other ones worth mentioning, Shadow Warrior 2, and the first Shadow Warrior for that matter. Neither of those are super high profile games, but they do have pretty solid production values. Shadow Warrior 1 really impressed me because it was a nice update of the original game's formula, combining it with sort of painkiller style arena combat and fast action arcadey gameplay. But it maintained the irreverent humour of the original 3D Realms version. Shadow Warrior 2 I enjoyed a lot because it provided exactly what I was looking for at the time I played it. Literally like a day or two before I picked up Shadow Warrior 3, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if someone did a first-person version of Diablo? And I didn't mean Borderlands by that, I didn't mean first-person shooter with looting, I meant a first-person game with melee combat, hack and slash, that still had looting and progression and that sort of thing. A couple of days later, Shadow Warrior 2 came out and provided exactly what I was looking for. So I really enjoyed that game. I thought it had wonderful production values, particularly because it was from a smaller developer. Really fun gameplay. I know some people were a bit put off Shadow Warrior 2 because it wasn't quite what they were expecting from a sequel, because it was structurally, it was very different from the first Shadow Warrior. but I really enjoyed it. Other things that I've enjoyed over the years, these are slightly earlier ones from a little bit longer ago, but the Need for Speed games I've always enjoyed. I haven't picked up a new one since, I think, Hot Pursuit on the 360. Like, I haven't picked up the remaster of Hot Pursuit or anything like that, but yeah, the sort of PS2 era and 360 PS3 era of Need for Speed I really enjoyed. I've actually picked up a few more since then because I've been getting into collecting 7th generation stuff while it's very cheap, so I've picked up a few Need for Speeds that I haven't played at all recently. Like, I've got the Run on my shelf. I've always wanted to try but never got around to, so there's that one. And the other one is the Burnout series. So Burnout 2 I've written about and done a video about recently. Those are absolutely some of my favourite arcade races. Arcade races in general, a lot of Western developed ones I'm a big fan of. Always like the Project Gotham series from Bizarre Creations as well. Blur, Split Second, stuff like that. So I'd say my interests in regards of Western games tend to be outside of sort of the most high profile of AAA games. Like, I don't really have much interest in what AAA tends to mean today, which is a large open world game with high production values and lots of cutscenes trying to hammer a message into your head in some way. So like, I've got no interest in playing The Last of Us, for example. I've got very little interest in playing Ghost of Tsushima. Had no interest in God of War, that sort of thing. All of these games seem to kind of blend into each other for me at the moment. So I'm sure they're all great games, but they just don't really appeal to what I'm looking for out of my gaming. And certainly the impression I get is that they're all fairly similar to one another. That's the impression I get looking in from the outside anyway. But anyway, there are some mainstream Western titles that I've enjoyed. And I've actually found myself, as I've been collecting the 7th generation stuff that I mentioned. In fact, if I just turn the camera over here, you should be able to just about see some of the Xbox 360 and original Xbox games that I've picked up relatively recently. I made my camera wonky now. Whoop. There we go. Yeah, so I've actually found I'm a bit more inclined to look at some of the stuff that I would have passed by when they were current and trying them again now. So I've picked up a fair amount of stuff that I didn't play when the Xbox 360 was current, but I'm still quite interested in playing now and catching up on. So there's stuff like The Darkness, Darksiders, Dead Space, Kane and Lynch, Mirror's Edge, a few of the Need for Speed games, as I say. Yeah, like I say, I don't have an aversion to Western games per se, apart from sort of arguably the most recent ones. And that's not that I hate them or anything, it's just that they don't really provide the sort of gaming experience I'm looking for at the minute. But yeah, if you want a quick answer to all that, then The Witcher 3, Shadow Warrior 2, Need for Speed, and Burnout. Right. Next question comes from Mage Vita, who asks, if you could have any VTuber as a guest on the Moe Gamer podcast, who would it be? Well, there's a lot of choices out there now, because VTubing has really exploded in the last year or so in particular. It's been a thing for a few years, of course, but in the last year or so, with the arrival of HoloLive EN and the growth of the English-speaking VTuber community sort of around that, and before HoloLive EN hit the scene even, yeah, it's really exploded in the last year or so in particular, I think. I think part of that is due to the pandemic. A lot of people are interested in finding means of connecting with and communicating with people in ways that we wouldn't have had access to before. And VTubing is good for people in a lot of ways because it provides a means of expressing yourself that you can't necessarily do if you're just talking to a camera face to face like I'm doing here. It allows people who are a bit lacking in self-confidence to put up a very obvious front to the world that no one questions, no one has a problem with, because it's an accepted part of VTuber culture that most VTubers are playing a character. They are playing the character that appears on screen, and sometimes they let a little bit of their real self out, but a lot of the time they are playing a character, and people are absolutely fine with that. I mean, the same is true to an extent with some streamers and YouTubers, I guess, but with VTubers it's it's a much greater focus on the character side of things, I think. And yeah, I've really sort of got into the scene a fair bit in the last year or so. I wouldn't say I'm deep down the rabbit hole or anything, but I did watch all of Hololive EN's debuts. I check in on them every so often. I watch a bit of VShojo stuff as well. And I've got some friends on Twitter who have been experimenting with VTubing as well on a much smaller scale as well. So shout outs to people like, who have we got? We've got Kyopin, who is one, and Super Nerd Martyr. I can't remember a VTube name. I do apologise for that. But yeah, she's been doing some VTubing as well. So shout outs to those people who are sort of trying their best in what is increasingly becoming a very crowded market. So be sure to go and support some of the small VTubers as well as the big names out there as well. That said, if money and obligations and perception and whatever was no object, then I think if I could have any VTuber as a guest on the Moe Gamer podcast, I think it would have to be Amelia Watson. She is probably my favourite of Hololive EN. I do like them all, but I think Amelia is my favourite, which I find quite interesting because her debut, her absolutely chaotic debut, if you watched it, I thought she was going to be my least favourite because her debut was absolute nonsense. Like a real sort of drug-fueled extravaganza, and she sang and she wasn't very good at singing, and then there was this whole sequence of her just pissing around with special effects because she'd injected the Watson concoction into her chat and so on. But I look back on that and thought, that took balls to do that. And then she followed that up with some very sort of honest and genuine and really likable streams as well. So yeah, she strikes me as someone that I would really enjoy having a conversation with. And she knows the stuff about video games, she knows the stuff about popular culture. And so I think she'd be someone who would make a really interesting guest on the podcast. So Amelia Watson is the answer for that one. All right, question from Flame Chocobo now. It's slightly NSFW one. Flame Chocobo asks, what kind of kinks do you have for anime girls? I'm fairly vanilla, to be perfectly honest. I mean, on Twitter these days, you're surrounded by all sorts of absolute degeneracy, and yeah, fair play to anyone who's into all of that sort of thing. I'm certainly not judging anyone. I follow a fair few people who are into some things that, yeah, would have probably raised a few eyebrows 10 or 20 years back. But yeah, I think my personal tastes are fairly vanilla. I have a thing for sort of kimono mimi, animal ears, particularly cat ears. So I'm a big fan of Sayori's work on Nekopara because they strike the good balance between sort of providing the cute aspects of the animal ears and stuff with, I guess, maintaining the human side of things as well. The interesting thing about the Nekopara characters is that they have a lot of cat about them. Sayori is obviously someone who knows her stuff about cats because a lot of the behaviours the characters in Nekopara exhibit are very cat-like. But at the same time, they have human-like responses to things as well. And that for me is like a really nice balance between sort of my favourite animals for pets. We've got 2 cats here, as you probably know, and cute anime girls. What I tend to find is that rather than sort of, I guess, visual kinks, you'd call them, I tend to find myself a bit more attracted to personality. So the types I find myself attracted to in terms of anime girls are sort of tsundere, I like a lot, Genki girls, sort of really energetic girls, and the sort of, I don't know if there's a good word for them, but sort of the anxious type. So if you look at someone like Nepgear from Nep Jr., who you know is one of my favourite characters, yeah, that sort of character there, who was a bit insecure. That character type in particular I enjoy because I find them quite relatable, and it's always nice to come across a character that you feel a connection with, that you feel like you understand what they're going through and how they're feeling about certain things. So that's why I like that particular character type. Tsundere and Genki girls, I don't know if I can really pin down what I like about them because I know that both of those character archetypes would drive me absolutely bonkers in reality. But for some reason in the anime world, I find them much more attractive and interesting. I think it's because the anime world sort of exaggerates everything, including your responses to things. And there's that block in your brain that lets you know, no, this isn't real. This is pure fantasy. This is something you can enjoy without having to worry about what is real or if this is plausible or whatever. Now, I think both of those character types are sort of so exaggerated and unrealistic that you can enjoy them without feeling that connection to reality. So yeah, sorry I don't have a particularly kinkier answer to that, but there you go. I guess you'd throw Futa in there as well, but this is YouTube, so we have to keep it a little bit more safe for work. Anyway, Flame Chocobo has a second question, moving on. I'm not sure if you've heard this one before yet, but did you know that Nippon Ichi Software, the company mastermind behind the Disgaea franchise, developed Pieces for the Super NES as their first title under their moniker Prism Kikaku? No, I didn't. I'd never heard of Pieces before, but I'd seen you mention this on a couple of Discord servers and on Twitter, and then in this question. So it was obviously something that you felt quite strongly about. So I was keen to check it out. So I checked out a ROM file of Pieces, and I really like it. It's a great little game. If you've not come across it before, Pieces, which I'll put some footage up for while I'm talking about this. Pieces is a jigsaw puzzle game, but it's kind of done in a very kind of arcadey style, a sort of arcade puzzler style versus puzzler style. So it's one player racing against another or a computer to fill in a jigsaw. So you're presented as usual with a picture of the jigsaw beforehand, and then you just have to sort of race to put all the pieces in the right place. But there are power-ups along the way. The quicker you put pieces in, the more you fill up a meter at the bottom of the screen, and each time you fill the meter, you get access to various power-up items. And some of those will help you find the right place to put the pieces in on the board. Others will mess with your opponent by doing things like reversing their controls or sweeping some of their pieces off the board, or sort of interrupting their movement every so often, or even sucking all their item power-ups out of them. And yeah, it's just a really fun game. It's a really simple game, but it's a really fun game, and I had no idea it existed, let alone the fact that an earlier incarnation of Nippon Ichi was behind it. So yeah, I'm going to have to look deeper into this and write something about it or make a video about it. So thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. I like it a lot. I have always kind of liked jigsaw puzzle games. We don't see many of them around these days, but there were a few sort of in the PS2 era, and there was one on Xbox 360, Xbox Live Arcade, that I liked a lot, called Puzzle Arcade, that had a bunch of different ways to play, including a sort of arcadey timed mode, a bit like what we've got in Pieces. But we don't see them much these days, largely because I think a lot of people don't have the attention span for them anymore. Because something like Puzzle Arcade, yes, it did provide small jigsaws, and Pieces provide small jigsaws as well, but Puzzle Arcade could also provide you with puzzles with like 1,000 pieces in them. And that takes a long time to put together, even if you're sort of particularly skilled at things, because especially on the computer screen, because you're sort of zooming in and out and trying to fit things together and find little bits and so on. And it's enjoyable and it's satisfying, particularly if you've got a certain type of mind who responds well to that sort of stimulation. But I just think that kind of thing probably wouldn't sell very well today, because a lot of gamers just don't have the attention span for it anymore, which is really unfortunate, I think, because there's a lot of scope for slower paced, more cerebral games, and they are catered to a certain extent with things like strategy games and so on, but sometimes it's nice to have something that is lightweight but still slow paced, if you know what I mean. So something that you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time thinking about, but something which you can still immerse yourself in for a few hours. So that's a bit of a shame. But yeah, Pieces for the Super NES, if you've never come across that before, I encourage you to check that out, because it's a really fun little game with some cute artwork, some nice characters, and some really catchy background music as well. So like I say, I'll probably write something about it or make a short play video about it or something in the very near future. So yeah, thanks Flame for bringing that to my attention. And the last question for today then, it's another one from Major Vita, who cheekily dumped in a second question, largely because I asked people for some more questions. But Major Vita's second question is, what is your most liked game in your least played genre? So, my least played genre, I had to think about this, because there's a few that I don't tend to gravitate towards that much, but I think probably my least played genre is strategy games. I'm not talking about strategy RPGs here, I'm talking about sort of the thing you typically associate with the PC. So very heavyweight stuff that has management aspects and lots of dealing with finances and long-term strategy and that sort of thing. 4X games are part of that, management sims are another offshoot of that. It's not a genre that I get on particularly well with for the most part, and so it's not a genre I tend to play very much. But there are a few that I've played over the years and enjoyed a lot. So the first one that springs to mind is SimCity on the Super NES. This was one of the first Super NES games that I got when I got my SNES for Christmas one year. And I remember my initial reaction to it being, oh, this isn't an arcadey game, this isn't Super Mario World. I did have Super Mario World as well, but this isn't an arcadey style game, or I'm not sure if I'm going to enjoy this. But I booted it up and gave it a go, and I really, really enjoyed it. There are lots of nice little things about SimCity on the Super NES in particular that make it feel a lot more accessible than sort of stuff on the PC. If you compare SimCity on the Super NES to SimCity on the PC, no contest. The Super NES version is much more accessible, much more friendly, much easier to understand. And a lot of that is just really simple things like having a musical background. So SimCity has a rather relaxing bit of background music that changes according to how big your city is. So it starts off with a very gentle piano piece, and as your city grows larger, it starts introducing more parts to the composition, it starts making it more rhythmic. And so by the time you're up to a Metropolis level, you've got something that is more approaching sort of, I guess, rock style, you'd call it. Yeah, so SimCity was a really early example of that. Endless Space is another one I want to give a shout out to, because that's one of the few 4X games that I feel like I've had a reasonably good time with. Endless Space is Amplitude's take on, I guess you'd call it sort of Master of Orion. Like, I've never actually played Master of Orion, so I don't know how similar the two are, but what I liked about Endless Space is that it didn't present you with too many options at any given point. So all of the different planets and star systems in the game were connected by discrete routes, for example. So you weren't sort of 3D charting your route through the galaxy and having to defend things from every angle, for example. It was very clear what you needed to focus on at any given time. And it also incorporated a lot of sort of board gaming aspects as well. There were cards you could play during combat that would sort of boost your ship's performance and so on. And yeah, I just liked it. I liked the way it was presented. Again, a bit like what I mentioned with SimCity, it was accessible and friendly, and it had a nice touch of humour about it as well that helped you to understand what was going on and make some progress. I wouldn't say I was good at it. I think I only won like one of the games I ever played of it, but I enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed the setting, I enjoyed the lore, and that helped me to enjoy the gameplay as well. The final one I want to give a shout out to here is A Valley Without Wind 2. A Valley Without Wind, the first one, I did a short play video on a while back. I'm not sure I'd call that a strategy game as such, because there's arguably more of a focus on the kind of action RPG aspects of that, of finding loot and spells and crafting things and getting better at combat. But A Valley Without Wind 2, they shook up the formula a bit, where there was a much stronger focus on the strategic side of things. So you were sort of moving things around on an isometric turn-based map to go and collect resources and engage in combat and that sort of thing. But there was still the platforming side of things as well. But the platforming stuff was kind of compressed a bit, so you weren't doing as much of it at once. You weren't going into these sort of endless sprawling worlds. It was much more structured with a clear start point and finish point and objective to do. Whereas the original Valley Without Wind was there was a really nice sense of exploration and figuring things out and working out exactly what you were supposed to do in it. But that could easily leave it feeling a bit directionless as well. Whereas A Valley Without Wind 2, there's a much greater sense of this is what you're supposed to do. These are your core objectives at the moment. This is what you should focus on doing. You should build this type of unit. You should put this type of unit here, send them off to do this. And again, I liked that because it didn't sort of leave me floundering with absolutely no idea what to do, but it also provided enough freedom for me to feel like I was actually figuring some things out for myself. It's a difficult balance to get right, and different people prefer different types of things in that regard. I think I know a lot of people who prefer strategy games to just leave them alone and let them get on with it. But yeah, certainly in my case, where I don't think my brain is quite wired correctly for strategic play, because I have the same problem with highly strategic board games as well. I can't think far enough ahead in order to be successful at them. But those games that give you a clear structure and objectives and things to do, I respond much better to them because, well, it's telling me what to do, basically. But yeah, okay, that is all the questions for this month. So As I say, if you would like to be part of this next month, if you sign up at patreon.com/Pete Davison and become an S-rank patron, you'll be able to submit your questions partway through the month when I remember to put the post up. S-rank patrons also get monthly wallpapers, and all patrons, whether they're A-rank or S-rank, get access to my daily blog posts about life, the universe, and whatever I feel like writing about at 2 in the morning usually. Yeah, gives you a bit of insight behind the scenes and see what's going on. So yeah, these Q&A videos are a lot of fun to record, so it'd be great to see some more questions from you, whether you're an existing patron or whether you are signing up after seeing this or after reading something on Moe Gamer. So lots of interesting stuff coming up in the new year, so I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy what's here on YouTube, and I hope you enjoy what's on moegamer.net. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.